Good morning. Afternoon. Lost track. I was so concentrating on this morning's conversations. Weren't they great? Thank all the panelists. So this morning we heard about libraries in the context of people, place, and platforms. Governor Malloy is recognized on the Rising to the Challenge report. Does anybody know what page? I've memorized it. I'm always telling people he's on page 23. And this was recognition for his taking action in support of the creation of what will be the first statewide ebook platform in the country. He has also been very supportive of both place and people by putting substantial funding into public library construction projects, which enable libraries to renovate and expand to meet 21st century library service models, and funding the infrastructure to bring broadband internet to libraries statewide. The governor has very many demands on his time, and we are really appreciative of his being here today to say a few words about libraries. Governor?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I have to say this food smells great. If only I'd gotten here a few minutes earlier. It's good to be with everyone. I do want to thank all of you for participating. I particularly want to thank the Aspen Institute as a convener. I think this is a great discussion item in this state and in all of our 50 states and territories as well. As an institute, libraries, an institution created so many years ago in our nation, are struggling to deal with the realities of the economy and the realities of a changing marketplace, quite frankly, where more and more information is at people's fingertips at home or on a train or we actually just built a transitway for buses where we have Wi-Fi. I mean, there is a reality that the ground is changing. And there are some other realities that quite frankly can't be swept away. Although the state's been able to participate at a higher level in doing things like working on ebooks on a statewide basis as opposed to an individual basis, library basis. There are other realities that the economy has not roared back in any way approaching what was every other post-World War II recession recovery. We just haven't. And we're 6 years into a recovery and still waiting for and looking for a robustness that has so far eluded us. And I think that is just as true on a statewide basis as and maybe more so on a local basis, where grand lists have not seen the kinds of growth in Connecticut that for a good part of the time that I was active in local politics from 1983 to 2009, that sounds scary, that we actually were able to see on a year-to-year basis. All of which says that libraries are struggling and having difficulty. And facing many challenges at the same time, the very same time that you have to redefine the mission to make it as current as possible, to make sure that the broad case of services that are being supplied, that you want to supply, are in fact being supplied. Relevancy is extremely important to all of you in this conversation. Although I didn't hear the conversation that may have taken place earlier today, I was fortunate to review a lot of the work that was done to set those up, and I have an appreciation for what I expect was actually discussed and what will be discussed this afternoon. Put it in context, I've been involved in libraries all of my life. It's the gremlins of the building. I have fond memories of growing up in Stamford and using the Ferguson Library in downtown for a place to hang out, a place to be read to, a place to borrow books, and a place to do research. Certainly had a great appreciation for my own university library, Boston College, it's on the list, along with Yale, as one of the 25 most spectacular libraries, collegiate libraries in America. And when I came home to Stamford to be involved in local politics, first on the Board of Finance and then subsequently as mayor, struggled with what was a redefining of the mission even as it existed in 1995. I well remember the proposal that I made, that the library system and the school system have a serious discussion about collaborating on all of the school libraries / media centers. And some early work was done, and ultimately a decision was made not to incorporate those operations. But, you know, a long time later, many years later, 20 years later, perhaps that's an idea that some folks will take yet another look at. I well remember approving a transaction where Starbucks coffee became a tenant in the Ferguson Library building on the first floor, thought to be quite innovative at the time. Of course, now we see those kinds of operations in other libraries in metropolitan or urban environments on a regular basis. All of which is to say, where do we go from here, with one final note as a precursor. And that is one of the things that I was very proud of having done in the city of Stamford while I was mayor, was to take our percentage of city budget devoted to the library system from about 1%, a little over 1%, to about 2% during the period of time that I was mayor. Now, I haven't tracked the percentage contribution, what the percentage currently in Stamford, but it's been a long time since I was mayor, so I won't take responsibility. Juanita, you can take responsibility for that if it's shrunk substantially. I'm not responsible. And I think that this has to be a dialogue that doesn't just involve professionals in the library field, but involves full communities, because in the state of Connecticut, there is a great variance between what communities do in support of local library services, and it has to be, we have to have an honest and frank discussion about how do our library systems as they currently exist, or as we envision them existing in the future, survive in an environment where government is not likely to be able to put a whole lot more money into libraries. I mean, state government certainly is not going to be in a position to do that. We have things in state government, for instance, that local governments don't have in Connecticut. We have a spending cap, which puts tremendous downward pressure on expenditures on kind of a 5-year wave, because that's what the spending cap is measured by. What happened as late as 5 years ago is still affecting how much money we can spend. In the state of Connecticut, local governments don't have that, although they exist not far from here. New York has a spending cap for municipalities. New Jersey has a spending cap for municipalities. That's a very real challenge, threat, something that has to be kept in mind, because if there's that kind of downward pressure on expenditures on a local level as well as a state level, and the state moderates, it's kind of, think of it as a wave, that's going to be yet another challenge that those libraries that receive a substantial amount of support from their local governments are going to have to face if that was to come to our state. By the way, I'm not promoting a local expenditure cap on local governments as it exists in other states. So you don't have to worry about that for the next 4 years, or this year and 3 years after. But it's a very real movement in the United States, and I think is a very big challenge to what we want libraries to be in the future. Then you move on to, well, if we have these financial challenges, and we want to be all that we can be within the communities that we exist, how do we find that next level of cost savings? Because let me be honest, I understand that everybody in this room who is in the library business has already found ways to save money and to do things less expensively. But the pressure isn't reducing. So what do we do next? How do we find the next level? I think being the first state to do something on a statewide basis on ebooks is an important signature item for Connecticut. I think not necessarily fully appreciated by the general population out there, but I think within the confines of this room, fully appreciated the significance. And I can tell you on the publishing side, fully appreciated for the significance it represents. But where do we go from here? And of course, that's an issue that you're all dealing with on a day-to-day day-to-day basis. Some of you have cut back hours. Most of you, I'm willing to get those who represent the libraries in the room, have seen a reduction in hours over the last, or at least since the Great Recession came about. Some of you may have restored some of those hours, some of you may not have. I know that there's a number of libraries in Connecticut that have closed satellite offices or limited the use of things like motorized libraries or delivery of services. Those are our realities. I'm not sure that every one of those cuts is the right cut. In fact, I think if every decision that is made about libraries in the future is solely a local issue, then there's an increased chance that we may not get it right. And so I think important dialogues like this one, ongoing at the invitation of the Aspen Institute, is an important one to have. What do I think they need to be? I think they need to be, libraries, the place that you go for the information you need to conduct your daily life and to change your life. And not just change your life from a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old to a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old, but on an ongoing participatory basis. I think that's the best model for community libraries to survive, to have a population understand that they are strongly tied to that institution in the community in which they live for the knowledge and access that they need to raise their children, to manage their finances, and to accept the challenge of the next career that they want to have or are forced to have. I think we need to think of libraries as a part of a continuum, part of a pre-K to 12 education system, part of a collegiate education system, and a system well beyond that, which really is the hub of lifelong learning, something that everybody in this room has been talking about for the better part of 20 years. Lifelong learning is, at least in part, dependent on the success of libraries as they exist in our urban areas, most particularly, but increasingly in our suburban and rural areas as well. The place that you go for training, whether it's how to use the internet or the latest technology, or to training for your next, as I said, intended job or job that you're being forced to pursue. I think these are all important portions of the mission, along with what has always been the traditional mission, or at least the traditional mission as identified over the last 40 years, helping to raise children, helping to provide that early educative system where children get a start, particularly if their parents are themselves users of library services. How do we reach out to the folks whose parents aren't library users is an important issue, most particularly in our urban environments as well. So how do we knit this thing together in a time of declining access to government dollars, which I don't think we're going to see any short-term relief from, meaning over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. How do we knit these things together at the most cost-effective way? And the great thing about what I get to do is I only have to raise the issue. You've got to answer it. And in fact, that answer has got to be done on a town-by-town, city-by-city, foundation basis if we're to make real progress, and if we're going to sustain the level of services which we're currently providing, as well as those aspirational services that so many of you in the library profession are thinking about, are hearing about in your ongoing educative programs that you yourself attend. These are important issues, and I was more than happy to accept the invitation to be with you months ago, I think about 6 months ago when we were first approached, or 4 to 6 months ago, and certainly happy to be here, even though I've had to do some things that I don't find comfortable when it comes to libraries, and that's trim back some level of the support that we can lend, in part because of what I've already spoken about, and that is a spending cap, which the state government deals with on an ongoing basis. I think there's an answer. I think the answer will lead us to a couple of things. Greater foundation support, greater fundraising efforts that are systemic in nature on a community-by-community basis, where a community understands its long-term and short-term obligation to the institution that has bound that community together for the better part of 100 or more years in our state and in the community in which the library is located. Finding ways to work and collaborate together. Collaborate's a big word and has been a big word in library systems and individual library-to-library functions in the past. I think it becomes even more important. And then being able to use technology in the most innovative way to save as much in the area of cost is obviously going to have to be a big part of what we do, while we recognize that that's not only the way that, you know, folks who are in their 20s desire to receive their materials, but increasingly for people as old as me who want to receive those materials as well. Finding that right balance is what you're all challenged with doing. And so it's great to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'll take a couple of questions if there are any. I see my sister Gail's not here. She was registered to be here, but she didn't come. Who's here from Stanford? Anybody? Juanita. How are you? Good, good. Sure, sure. No, it's important work. And what is the percentage of city spending in Stanford that's represented by the library system? Do you know? All right. Well, next time I see you, that's the test. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Chris Bradley, Library Director there. Governor, I wanted to put in a plea for 2 small statewide programs. And as you know, most of our dollars that support library come from the locals, and they decide, okay? But there are 2 small programs that have been around since 1976. And one is Connecticut Card, and one is Connecticut Car. The Connecticut Card program reimburses libraries for serving out-of-town residents. And Connecticut people love this. I can go anywhere with my library card and borrow things. Why? Because the state, since 1976, has made a small reimbursement to those libraries who go beyond.
I'm familiar with the program.
You know, okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, Governor, when we talk about all the things you want to do and the things that make our state great, these are small programs that knit together a lot of local funding. Sure. So, give us another look.
Yeah. No. Listen, you know, put yourself in my shoes for a moment. You're leading a state. Revenues are not as robust as you would like. And you have a spending cap to boot. And so what you try to do is put a budget together that you give to the legislature, knowing that there's going to be additional discussion and change. And then put yourself in my shoes one case further. I'm actually increasing spending by 3%. Right? And so there's half the world angry that I'm increasing spending at 3%, and half the world is angry that I'm not increasing spending by 6%. All of which I've got to explain to the nature of revenue and a spending cap. Now, that doesn't mean that we have everything right. In fact, you know, I've acknowledged from day one, we send the budget to the legislature for further deliberation. But I have to warn you that these constraints are real, and people can make promises that they're going to protect you from it. I ran against a guy for governor who promised that he was going to have a flat budget. I just told you I raised spending by 3% in my proposed budget. So, and in part we did that because not only are we committed to libraries, and I understand, you know, the significance of those things, but we're also committed to early childhood education, which we're expanding rapidly, and in many cases cooperating with libraries to do that where you're housing some of that. Well, we want to expand that. We want to make sure that school systems don't have fewer dollars come September 1st, but actually have as many, and in some cases slightly more than they did the prior September. So it is very much a balancing act, and I'm not saying that we have it right, but what I'm saying to you is the basic size of the budget is pretty much defined. And you know, what's little for someone, and it isn't a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but what's little for somebody's got to ultimately, more likely than not, got to come out of some other program's hide, which makes some of the things that we're doing, like ebooks, that much more important. Now, I understand that there are charges if the book's to be delivered by a library van or to be delivered by UPS or some other. I mean, I understand that there's a cost associated with that. But at some point, we lose the elasticity of budget making to what are other constraints, spending caps, revenue. But I hear you. I do. Honestly, I do. And I can assure you, as somebody who's had a long personal relationship with libraries, none of this is done easily. One more question, and then I got to get out of here. Sure, all the way back there.
My name is Lawrence.
Oh, hi, how are you?
I have two things. If you cut out the needle exchange program, the methadone clinics, and stop sending the money up to Canada and Africa, we'd have a lot of money.
Okay, we'll do that. But let me say one other thing, and I left out one of the other things that we do in Stamford, which is the passport office. For a long time, has been, in essence, the library there has acted as the library or the passport office. Now, of course, we did that when the passport office moved from Stamford to Norwalk. Now, of course, we have a little more territory, but great service that brings people in and establishes a further contact with the general population of a community and their library. And I know in the early days, it was a gigantic eye-opener for folks who hadn't been to the library in 5, 10 or more years to come in and understand what a modern library, at least as of when we did that, which was about 2000, if I remember correctly. Not a bad memory for an old guy. It was also an interesting thing. I think this idea of cross-pollinating services and the like are very, very important. Listen, it's happy to be with you. Good luck in your second half of the day, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.